The church doors swung open, and a hushed silence fell over the guests. The organ began to play the familiar, triumphant notes of the wedding march. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, the day my only son, Michael, was getting married. I smoothed down my dress, a beautiful silk gown in a shade of soft lavender, and prepared to walk down the aisle. But as I took my first step, my eyes lifted to the altar at the far end of the church, and I saw him. Standing there, next to my son, was the groom. And the groom was my husband. My husband, Daniel, who had died in a boating accident 15 years ago. My husband, whose ashes were in an urn on my mantelpiece. My mind screamed, my legs buckled, but I didn't fall. Because in that single, heart-stopping moment, I realized this wasn't a miracle. This wasn't a ghost. This was a conspiracy, a monstrous, 15-year-long lie, and I had just walked into the final, horrifying act. My name is Isabella, and until that moment, I believed I was a widow. 15 years ago, my life was perfect. I was married to Daniel, a brilliant and charismatic marine biologist. We had a beautiful son, Michael, and a life filled with love, laughter, and the scent of the sea from our coastal home. Daniel was a man of adventure. His work often took him on long research expeditions, sometimes for months at a time. I was used to his absences, always trusting, always waiting for his joyful return. Then came the call that shattered my world. There had been an accident during an expedition in the South Pacific, a storm. His research vessel had capsized. There were no survivors. They never found his body, only a few pieces of wreckage. I was given a death certificate, a folded flag, and a lifetime of grief. I crumbled. For a year, I was a ghost in my own life. But I had Michael, my beautiful 10-year-old son, who had his father's eyes and his father's spirit. For him, I pulled myself out of the darkness. I became both mother and father. I managed the substantial life insurance policy and the investments Daniel had left, ensuring Michael had everything he ever needed. I raised him to be a good, kind man, a man his father would have been proud of. Years passed. The sharp edges of grief softened into a dull, constant ache. Michael grew up, went to college, and fell in love with a woman named Sarah. She was sweet, quiet, and she adored Michael. I was thrilled. When they announced their engagement, I threw myself into the wedding planning with a joy I hadn't felt in years. This was it, a new beginning, a new chapter of happiness for our family. The wedding day was perfect. The sun was shining, the church was filled with flowers, and the air was thick with love and anticipation. I sat in the front pew, my heart swelling with pride as I watched Michael, my son, standing at the altar. He looked so much like his father. And then the bride's side of the church doors opened for the groom to take his place, and he walked out. He was older, of course. His dark hair was now flecked with silver at the temples. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. But it was him. It was Daniel. The way he stood, the set of his shoulders, the small, almost invisible scar on his chin from a childhood sailing accident. It was my husband. A wave of dizziness washed over me. The sounds of the church, the organ, the rustling of guests, faded into a dull roar. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible. Was I hallucinating? Was this a cruel joke? A long-lost identical twin? He saw me. His eyes, the same deep blue eyes I had fallen in love with, met mine across the long aisle. For a fraction of a second, I saw a flicker of something in his gaze. Not love, not recognition. It was panic. Pure, cold, animal panic. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it was gone, replaced by a smooth, pleasant, and utterly blank smile as he turned to face the front, as if I were just another guest in the crowd. The wedding march began. The bride, Sarah's younger sister, the maid of honor, gently touched my arm. "Aunt Isabella, it's time for the mother of the groom to walk." My legs felt like lead, but I forced myself to move. I walked down that aisle, my gaze locked on the man at the altar, the man who was my dead husband, the man who was about to marry my son's new sister-in-law, the man who had let me believe he was dead for 15 years. I didn't see a miracle. I saw a monster. And in the space of that short walk down the aisle, my 15 years of grief and love curdled into something else. Something cold, something hard, something utterly unforgiving. My son's wedding was not a celebration. It was a declaration of war. A war I never knew I was a part of, but a war I was now going to finish. Walking down that aisle was the longest journey of my life. Each step was a battle between my heart, which screamed Daniel's name, and my mind, which was frantically trying to piece together the shattered fragments of my reality. The guests smiled at me, their faces beaming. They saw the proud mother of the groom. They didn't see a woman walking towards her own ghost, a woman whose entire life had just been revealed as a lie. When I reached the front pew, I sat down, my body moving on autopilot. I looked at my son, Michael. He was beaming, completely oblivious. He gave me a small, happy wink. He saw his mother, sharing in his joy. He didn't see the woman whose world was imploding. Then I looked back at the man at the altar. My husband, Daniel. He was standing next to his best man, a man I didn't recognize. He was avoiding my gaze, staring straight ahead at the stained glass window, a picture of calm composure, an actor in the final scene of his play. The ceremony began. The priest's words were a meaningless drone in my ears. I couldn't process them. I could only stare at Daniel's profile, the familiar line of his jaw, the way he held his hands clasped behind his back, a nervous habit he always had. 15 years. 15 years I had mourned him. I had held a memorial service on a windswept cliff overlooking the ocean, casting flowers into the waves because there was no body to bury. I had spent countless nights crying into his pillow, clutching his old sweaters, inhaling the faint, lingering scent of him. I had raised our son alone, telling him stories of his heroic, adventurous father, the man who had been stolen from us by the sea. And he had been alive all this time. The bride, a lovely girl named Chloe, Sarah's sister, walked down the aisle. She was beautiful and young, so young. She couldn't be more than 25. Daniel, my Daniel, was 50. The age gap was jarring. As she reached the altar, he turned and smiled at her. It was his signature smile, the one that had made me fall in love with him, the one that could light up a room. But seeing it now, directed at another woman, a woman half his age, it felt grotesque. It was a liar's smile. As they exchanged vows, I felt a cold, hard clarity descend upon me. This wasn't a case of amnesia. This wasn't a man who had been lost at sea and miraculously rescued with no memory of his past. The flash of panic I had seen in his eyes when he first saw me was proof. He knew exactly who I was, and he was terrified that I was here. This meant his disappearance, his death, had been a choice, a deliberate act. He had abandoned us. He had abandoned me, and he had abandoned his 10-year-old son. But why? And how? The questions hammered at me. The life insurance policy, a substantial one, had been paid out without question. His death had been legally certified. This wasn't a simple disappearance. This was a complex, meticulously planned deception. As the priest declared them man and wife, and they shared their first kiss, the applause from the guests felt like a physical blow. My son was clapping, a huge smile on his face, thrilled for his new sister-in-law and her mysterious, handsome new husband. He was applauding the marriage of the woman who was now his family to the man who was his father, a father he believed was dead. The irony was so sick, so twisted, it was almost a physical poison. I needed to get out. I needed to think. I slipped out of the pew during the recessional as the happy couple walked back down the aisle, showered with rice and blessings. I avoided the receiving line, the congratulations, the questions. I found a quiet corner in the church vestibule, my heart pounding, my mind racing. I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely type. I had one person I could call, one person who might be able to help me make sense of the impossible. My lawyer, Mr. Gable, the man who had handled Daniel's estate 15 years ago, a man of immense discretion and even greater resources. Mr. Gable, I said when he answered, my voice a strained whisper. It's Isabella. I have a situation. A problem. I'm at my son's wedding and I need you to do something for me. I need you to run a background check, a deep one, on the groom. The groom? He asked, confused. Michael's getting married? No, I said, my voice cracking. Not my son. The other groom. The man who just married my son's new sister-in-law. His name is Daniel. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Daniel? As in, your Daniel. I don't know, I lied. I couldn't bring myself to say it out loud yet. He looks exactly like him. Exactly. I need to know who he is. I need to know everything. Consider it done, Isabella," Mr. Gable said, his voice now low and serious. "I'll put my best people on it immediately. Go to the reception. Act normal. Smile. Do not let anyone see that anything is wrong. And do not, under any circumstances, confront him. We don't know what we're dealing with yet. Act normal. Smile. It was the hardest performance of my life." I walked into that reception hall, a battlefield disguised with flowers and champagne. I found my son, hugged him, and told him how happy I was for him. And then I saw them, Daniel and his new young bride, Chloe, holding hands, accepting congratulations. He saw me approaching. That flicker of panic was back in his eyes, quickly masked by a polite, charming smile. My son, Michael, took me by the arm. "Mom, I want you to meet Chloe's new husband," he said, beaming. "This is Daniel. Daniel, this is my mother, Isabella." I came face to face with the ghost of my husband. I looked into his eyes, the eyes that had once held my entire world. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Daniel," I said, my voice a perfect, steady melody of polite indifference. "Congratulations on your wedding." His hand, when he shook mine, was cold as ice. "Thank you, Isabella," he said, his voice a low, smooth baritone, the voice that had once whispered my name in the dark. "It's a pleasure to meet you too." The lie was absolute. The betrayal was complete. The war had just begun. The wedding reception was a 4-hour-long torture session. I moved through the room in a daze, a ghost at my own son's celebration. I smiled. I made small talk. I toasted the happy couple. Every moment was a performance, every polite nod a lie. My eyes kept finding him across the room. Daniel, laughing with guests, dancing with his new bride. He moved with the same easy grace I remembered, the same confident charm. But now, it all looked like a costume, a carefully constructed persona. I watched him interact with my son, Michael. He was polite, but distant. There was no spark of recognition, no hint of a shared past. He was a stranger to his own son. Michael, completely oblivious, treated him with the friendly respect one shows a new in-law. He had no idea he was making small talk with the father he had spent 15 years idolizing and mourning. The pain of that deception was a physical ache in my chest. I needed information. I found Sarah, Michael's new wife, a sweet and unsuspecting girl. "Sarah, darling, your sister looks so happy," I said, my voice dripping with motherly warmth. "Her husband, Daniel, he's so handsome. What's his story?" "Michael told me he's quite a mystery man." Sarah laughed. "Oh, he is. Chloe met him on a trip to Europe last year. It was a total whirlwind romance. He's an investment banker, apparently very successful, but very private. He told Chloe he was an orphan, grew up in England, and has no family to speak of. It's all very romantic and tragic, isn't it?" An orphan, grew up in England. The lies were so detailed, so specific. This wasn't just a man hiding from his past. This was a man who had meticulously constructed a new one. Later, I overheard a conversation between two of Chloe's bridesmaids. "I don't know. There's something off about him," one whispered. "He's charming, but it's like he's not real. And he's so much older than her." "Are you kidding?" the other one replied. "He's rich, and he adores her." Chloe hit the jackpot. Rich, of course. That had to be part of it. But where had the money come from? The life insurance payout from his death had been substantial, but not enough to fund a 15-year disappearance and a new life as a successful investment banker. My phone vibrated in my purse. A text from Mr. Gable. It was a single sentence. "The rabbit hole is deep. I need to see you tomorrow, 9 a.m. Getting through the rest of the night was an act of pure will. I pleaded a headache and left before the final dances. As I drove home, my mind was a maelstrom of questions. Why fake his death? Why abandon his son? Why reappear now, in this way, so close to the life he had left behind? Was it just for a younger woman? It felt bigger than that, more complex, more sinister. The next morning, I was in Mr. Gable's office. The file he had on his desk was thick. "Isabella," he said, his face grave. "This is one of the strangest cases I have ever seen. The man who married Chloe Evans yesterday is legally Daniel Sterling. He has a British passport, a birth certificate, and a full financial history going back 10 years. On paper, he is a completely different person from your late husband, Daniel Davenport. But it's him, Mr. Gable," I insisted. "I know it's him." "I believe you," he said. "My investigators have been working all night." The official story is paper thin when you start to push on it. The company he claims to work for in London is a shell. The address for his apartment is a mail drop. It's a ghost identity, but a very, very well-made one. He paused, then slid a photograph across the desk. It was a picture of Daniel, my Daniel, taken 6 months ago, getting out of a taxi in front of a sleek, modern office building downtown. The sign on the building read, "Sterling Thorne Investments." "Thorne?" I asked, the name sending a chill down my spine. It felt vaguely familiar, like a name from a bad dream. "The firm is run by a man named Julian Thorne," Mr. Gable explained. "A very powerful, very ruthless corporate raider. We're still digging into their connection, but it seems your Daniel, or this new Daniel, works for him, or with him." Then Mr. Gable delivered the next blow. "We also looked into the accident 15 years ago. The report is thin. The boat capsized in a freak storm. The company that owned the research vessel went bankrupt a month later. The investigation was closed very quickly, too quickly, and the insurance payout on the vessel itself was massive." "What are you saying?" I whispered. "I'm saying," he said, his eyes dark, "that the storm may not have been the only freak thing about that accident. It's possible the entire event was staged." The room started to spin. Daniel hadn't just disappeared. He had orchestrated a massive fraud. He had faked his own death, collected millions in insurance, and vanished, leaving me and his 10-year-old son to grieve a lie. "But why, Mr. Gable? Why would he do that?" "That," he said, is the multi-million-dollar question, and I have a feeling the answer is connected to this Julian Thorne. My grief, my love, my 15 years of mourning, it was all based on a lie. A cruel, calculated, and immensely profitable lie. The sadness I had felt was replaced by a burning, white-hot fury. He had not just abandoned us, he had betrayed us in the most profound way imaginable. "I want to know everything," I said, my voice low and hard. "I want to know where the money went. I want to know who this Thorne is, and I want to know why he came back. Find it all, Mr. Gable. Spare no expense." "I already have my best people on it," he said. "But Isabella, you need to be careful. These are not people to be trifled with. If they were willing to fake a death, there's no telling what else they're capable of." I just smiled, a cold, hard smile that didn't reach my eyes. They think I'm a grieving widow, a soft, harmless mother-in-law. They have no idea who they're dealing with. They started this war 15 years ago. I'm just here to finish it. My home, once a sanctuary of loving memories, became a war room. My quiet life as a retired librarian became a double life as a secret investigator. By day, I was Isabella, the gracious mother of the groom, welcoming my new in-laws, Sarah and Chloe, into the family. By night, I was a woman obsessed, poring over the reports from Mr. Gable's investigators, connecting the dots of a 15-year-old conspiracy. I had to play my part perfectly. I invited the newlyweds, Michael and Sarah, and the other newlyweds, Daniel and Chloe, over for dinner. It was the most surreal and agonizing meal of my life, sitting at the same table with the man I thought was dead, watching him charm my son, watching him pretend he was meeting me for the first time. "So, Daniel," I asked, my voice a perfect blend of polite curiosity, "what exactly does an investment banker do? It all sounds so complicated." He smiled his smooth, easy smile. "It is, Isabella. Mostly, I help companies restructure their assets, find hidden value, unlock potential. Unlock potential." He was a grave robber, unlocking the potential of a dead man's life. Michael, my dear, oblivious son, was completely taken with him. "You should talk to Daniel, Mom. He's brilliant. He was telling me about some investment strategies for your portfolio." I could feel Daniel's eyes on me, a subtle, probing gaze. He was testing the waters. He was trying to get a sense of the fortune he had abandoned, the fortune he was likely planning to reclaim. "Oh, I don't know," I said, with a dismissive wave of my hand. "It's just a simple conservative portfolio, nothing exciting. My late husband was a very cautious man." I watched for his reaction, a flicker of disappointment in his eyes. Or was I imagining it? The evening was a minefield. Every word, every glance was part of the game. He was studying me, and I was studying him. It was a silent, deadly chess match, and he had no idea I could see the whole board. Meanwhile, Mr. Gable's team was digging deeper. The connection to Julian Thorne was the key. Thorne was a corporate vulture of the highest order. He specialized in hostile takeovers, buying up distressed companies, stripping them of their assets, and leaving nothing but a bankrupt shell. And his biggest competitor, 15 years ago? My great-grandfather's old company, Sinclair Innovations, which had been resurrected by a new generation and was, at the time of Daniel's death, on the verge of a major technological breakthrough. The freak storm that had sunk Daniel's research vessel now looked very different. It looked like corporate sabotage. The report from Mr. Gable was chilling. The insurance payout for the sunken vessel had been paid out to its parent company, a holding firm based in the Cayman Islands, a firm owned by Julian Thorne. And a week after the payout, a new investment banker named Daniel Sterling, with a fresh British passport, had opened a multi-million-dollar account in Switzerland. The picture was becoming horribly clear. Daniel hadn't just faked his death to escape our life. He had faked his death as part of a deal with the devil. He had likely sunk his own ship, sabotaged his own research that may have been beneficial to Sinclair Innovations, in exchange for a cut of the insurance money and a new life. He had sold his soul and his family for a payout. But that didn't explain why he was back. Why risk everything to reappear now, in this place, so close to the life he had destroyed? The answer came from an unexpected source. Sarah, my sweet, unsuspecting daughter-in-law. She came to me one afternoon, her face troubled. "Isabella," she said hesitantly, "I don't want to cause trouble, but something's strange with Daniel, Chloe's new husband." "What is it, dear?" I asked, my heart pounding. "He asks so many questions about you," she said. "About your finances, about your late husband's will. He told Chloe he was worried about you, that a widow living alone is vulnerable, and he wanted to make sure your affairs were in order. He even asked Chloe to try and find your legal documents, your will, your investment statements. He said he just wanted to look them over to make sure you were protected." The trap was closing. He wasn't back by coincidence. He was back for the rest of it. He had gotten his payout 15 years ago, but he knew about the life insurance, the investments, the house, the assets of the grieving widow. He had returned to claim the second half of his prize, and his new young wife, Chloe, was his unwitting tool. He was using her and her connection to my family to get inside my life, to assess my wealth, and to figure out how to take it. His arrogance was breathtaking. He thought I was the same naive, trusting woman he had left behind. He thought I was a soft target. He had no idea he was walking into a house that was now a fortress, guarded by a woman who had spent 15 years honing her grief into a weapon. I smiled at Sarah. "Thank you for telling me, dear. That is odd, but I'm sure he means well. He just seems like a very cautious man." But as she left, my smile faded. The final pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. I knew what he wanted. Now I just had to figure out how to use it against him. I needed to bait the trap. And I knew exactly what bait to use. The one thing a man like him could never resist. the promise of more. The bait was a lie, a beautiful and glittering fabrication. It was time to give the ghost what he was haunting me for. I needed him to believe that the simple, conservative portfolio I had was in fact a massive, untapped fortune. I called Mr. Gable. "I need you to create a fake portfolio," I said, "a work of financial fiction. I want it to look like the life insurance payout and my investments have grown through some lucky stock picks in a booming market into a fortune. Not just comfortable, obscene, tens of millions. A ghost portfolio for a ghost," Mr. Gable chuckled. "I like it. My team can create something completely convincing. Bank statements, stock certificates, everything. And I need it to be discoverable," I added. "Not too easy, but not impossible. I want him to feel like he's a brilliant detective, uncovering a secret I don't even know I have." The trap was set. For the next few weeks, I began my own performance. I started complaining to Sarah and Michael about my complicated finances. "Oh, these papers from the bank are so confusing," I'd sigh over dinner. "I don't know a stock from a bond. Your father handled all of this. I'm probably losing money and don't even know it." I knew Sarah would report this back to Chloe, and Chloe would report it back to Daniel. I was dangling the bait, making myself look like the perfect mark, a wealthy, financially illiterate widow. Then I accidentally left a bank statement from the fake portfolio on the coffee table when I knew Chloe and Daniel were coming over. I watched on a tiny camera I'd had installed as Chloe's eyes went wide when she saw the number at the bottom of the page, an account balance with 7 zeros. I saw her subtly take a picture of it with her phone when she thought no one was looking. The hook was in. That night, the phone call I had been waiting for came. It was Daniel. His voice was a smooth, concerned purr. "Isabella," he said, "Chloe was just telling me she saw a piece of mail at your house today. She was worried. It looked like you have a very significant amount of money in a single unmanaged account. That's very risky in this volatile market." "Oh, I don't know, Daniel," I said with a sigh. "It's all so confusing." "I know," he said, "and I don't want to overstep. But as a member of this family now, I feel a certain responsibility to make sure you're protected. I would be happy to just look over your portfolio. At no charge, of course. Just to make sure your advisors are doing a good job." He was in. He thought he was offering his services. He was actually walking into my web. That's very kind of you, Daniel," I said, my voice trembling with gratitude. "I would appreciate that so much." The next day, he came over. He sat at my dining room table, the same table where he had once sat as my husband, and I laid out the entirety of the fake portfolio Mr. Gable had created. It was a work of art. It looked completely real, a vast and poorly managed fortune just waiting for a brilliant financial mind to unlock its potential. He spent hours going through the papers. I watched his eyes gleam with a greedy, triumphant light. He had found it, the mother lode, the prize he had waited 15 years for. He thought I was a fool, a rich, clueless widow. He had no idea that every document he was touching was a carefully forged deed. and that Mr. Gable was at that very moment using his access to these accounts to create a digital paper trail that would lead directly back to him and his fraudulent identity. "Isabella," he said finally, his voice grave but filled with a barely concealed excitement. "This is much worse than I thought. Your money is just sitting there, doing nothing. It's practically losing value. You are in desperate need of a new financial strategy." "What should I do?" I asked, my eyes wide with innocence. "You need to consolidate these assets," he said. "Move them into a more dynamic, secure structure. A private family trust. It will protect your wealth, minimize your taxes, and ensure a lasting legacy for Michael and your future grandchildren." A private family trust. His family trust. A trust he would control. The final move in his long, patient game. "A trust?" I asked. "That sounds so complicated." "It's not," he said, placing a reassuring hand on my arm. "I can handle everything. I'll have my lawyers draw up the papers. All you'll have to do is sign. We can protect your future, Isabella. Let me do that for you." He thought he was offering to protect me. He was actually asking me to hand him the gun, the bullets, and to point him in the direction of his own foot. "Okay, Daniel," I said, my voice a soft, trusting whisper. "I don't know what I'd do without you. I trust you completely." The look on his face was one of pure, unadulterated triumph. The ghost had finally found his treasure, and he had no idea it was buried in a graveyard of his own making. The week that followed was a blur of legal documents and hushed, excited phone calls. Daniel, was a man possessed. He was on the verge of claiming the prize his family had coveted for a generation, and his arrogance was blinding. He and his lawyers, a team of shady associates connected to Julian Thorne, drew up the paperwork for the new Isabella Davenport Family Trust. It was, on the surface, a standard trust document. But buried deep within the convoluted legal jargon were the clauses that would seal my fate, or so he thought. The document named him as the co-trustee, with the power to make all investment decisions. It also contained a subtle but critical clause. In the event of my incapacitation or death, he would become the sole trustee with absolute control over all assets. He wasn't just planning to manage my money. He was planning to inherit it. Mr. Gable reviewed every line. "It's a work of art," he said with a grim chuckle. "A beautifully crafted instrument of theft. He's left himself just enough plausible deniability. He could argue he was just acting in your best interest as a concerned family member. But he's made one fatal mistake." "What's that?" I asked. "He's arrogant," Mr. Gable said. "He believes he's the smartest man in the room. He's about to find out he's not even the smartest man in his own marriage." The signing was scheduled for a Friday at a neutral location, a private room at a downtown bank. Daniel wanted it to feel official, secure. He wanted me to feel like I was making a wise, prudent decision. That week, I played the part of the nervous, excited heiress. "Are you sure about this, Daniel?" I'd ask him over dinner. "It feels like so much is happening so fast." "Trust me, Isabella," he'd say, his voice a smooth, confident purr. "This is the best, the only thing to do. We're securing our family's future. Michael's future." He used my son's name like a shield, a justification for his greed. It was vile. The day of the signing arrived. I dressed simply in a gray suit, looking every bit the part of the sober, slightly overwhelmed widow. Daniel arrived to pick me up in his new Porsche, a car I knew was leased on the promise of his impending fortune. He was beaming. It was his victory lap. As we drove downtown, he placed a hand on my knee. "You're doing the right thing, Isabella. You're finally safe." "You have no idea how right you are," I thought. We walked into the bank's private conference room. It was cold and sterile. His lawyer, a man with the dead eyes of a shark, was already there. The documents spread neatly on the table. "Clara Alex," he said, his voice unctuous and smooth. "A momentous day." Daniel pulled out a chair for me, the perfect gentleman. "Ready to secure our future, my love?" he whispered in my ear. I sat down, my heart a cold, steady drum. I picked up the heavy, expensive fountain pen they provided. I looked at the signature line, and then I paused. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice trembling slightly. I feel so foolish. My late husband, he always made me promise I would never sign a legal document without my own lawyer present. It's silly, I know, but would you mind if I just had Mr. Gable come and look this over? Just for my own peace of mind. He's just downstairs in the lobby." Daniel's smile tightened. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. This was an unexpected delay. "Isabella, honey, that's really not necessary. Frank here is one of the best." "I know," I said, my voice small and apologetic. "But it would make me feel so much better." It was a promise to my husband. "Please?" He couldn't refuse without looking like a bully. He let out an exasperated sigh. "Fine," he said. "Fine, call your little lawyer. Let's get this over with." I made the call. A minute later, Mr. Gable walked in. He was not alone. He was flanked by two large, imposing men in dark suits. They did not look like lawyers. "Isabella," Mr. Gable said, his voice calm and authoritative, "I'm glad you called me. I would advise you not to sign these documents." "What is the meaning of this?" Daniel demanded, jumping to his feet. "Who are you people?" "My name is Marcus Gable," Mr. Gable said, placing his worn briefcase on the table. "And I am the legal counsel for the estate of the late Daniel Davenport. Your estate. The one you fraudulently abandoned 15 years ago." The color drained from Daniel's face. He stared at Mr. Gable, then at me, his mind finally, belatedly, catching up. "These gentlemen," Mr. Gable continued, gesturing to the men beside him, "are not with my firm. They are from the FBI's white-collar crime division." Daniel looked like he had been turned to stone. His shark of a lawyer was frantically gathering his papers, trying to edge towards the door. "And these documents," Mr. Gable said, picking up the trust agreement, "are not just a proposal. They are a signed confession. a meticulously detailed plan to commit wire fraud and conspiracy to defraud, a plan you were about to execute. He turned to the federal agents. I believe you'll find everything you need right here. One of the agents stepped forward. Daniel Sterling, or should I say, Daniel Davenport, he said, his voice flat and official. You are under arrest for insurance fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. As the agent pulled Daniel's arms behind his back, the sound of handcuffs clicking shut echoed in the silent, sterile room. Daniel didn't struggle. He just stared at me, his handsome face a mask of pure, unadulterated disbelief. He had been so close. He had tasted the victory. He finally found his voice, a hoarse, strangled whisper. You, he said, the single word dripping with a universe of hate. You knew all this time. I stood up and walked over to him. I looked into the eyes of the man I had loved, the man I had mourned, the man who had betrayed me. Yes, I said, my voice as cold and as clear as a winter morning. I knew. You came back from the dead to rob your own grave. Did you really think I would just let you? I smiled, a real, genuine smile, a smile of pure, liberating victory. Welcome home, Daniel. The arrest was only the beginning of the end. The case against Daniel Davenport was a legal slam dunk. He had walked into a trap so perfectly constructed, there was no escape. The evidence was overwhelming. The fraudulent documents he had prepared, the digital trail of the phantom portfolio, and the testimony of Mr. Gable's investigators, who had chronicled his every move. But the real blow came from a source he never anticipated. His new, young wife, Chloe. Faced with the reality that her rich, successful husband was actually a bankrupt con man about to go to prison, her undying love evaporated in an instant. Mr. Gable approached her with a deal. Testify against Daniel about his plans to seize my assets, and we would not pursue legal action against her as a co-conspirator. She didn't hesitate for a second. She stood on the witness stand, a picture of tearful, wronged innocence. She told the court how Daniel had manipulated her, how he had deceived her about his past and his intentions. She painted herself as just another victim of his grand deception. It was a masterful performance, and it sealed his fate. Daniel was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. He lost everything. His freedom, his stolen money, his fabricated life. The ghost was finally put in his grave. The fallout for the Thorne family, the architects of this generational war, was equally devastating. The federal investigation into Daniel's fraud uncovered Julian Thorne's role as a co-conspirator. His firm, Sterling Thorne Investments, was revealed to be a massive money laundering operation. He too was arrested, and his corporate empire crumbled, taking the last vestiges of the Thorne family's power with it. They were ruined, publicly and financially, their name once again synonymous with disgrace. My life, which had been a storm of secrets and lies, finally found its calm. The legal battles were over. The ghosts were gone. I was left with the truth, and with the substantial real fortune my husband, my real husband, had left me. I sold the big house on the coast. It was beautiful, but it was haunted by too many memories, both good and bad. I bought a smaller, elegant apartment in the city with a beautiful view and a library filled with books, and I began to live. For the first time in 15 years, I was not just a widow. I was not just a mother. I was Isabella. I traveled. I went to the opera. I joined a book club. I reconnected with old friends who had been pushed to the periphery of my grief-stricken life. My son, Michael, and his wife, Sarah, were horrified when the truth came out. Michael couldn't reconcile the image of his heroic dead father with the cold, calculating con man he was revealed to be. It took time and many long, difficult conversations, but we slowly began to rebuild our relationship, this time on a foundation of honesty, however painful. He finally understood the strength it had taken for me to navigate the lies, and he began to see me not just as his mother, but as a survivor. About a year after Daniel's sentencing, I was at a charity auction for the city library. I had become a significant benefactor, using a portion of my fortune to fund literacy programs and renovate old library branches. As I was mingling, a man approached me. He was in his late 60s, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "Mrs. Davenport," he said, "my name is Henry. I was a friend of your late husband, the real one." We talked for over an hour. He had been a fellow marine biologist on some of Daniel's early expeditions. He told me stories about the young, passionate, brilliant man I had fallen in love with. The man before the greed, before the deal with the devil. "He was a good man once," Henry said sadly. "But he had a weakness, a deep-seated fear of not being enough, of not having enough. I think that's what Thorne preyed on. He offered him a shortcut to a greatness Daniel felt he had to earn." Talking to Henry was a gift. It allowed me to separate the man I had loved from the monster he had become. It allowed me to mourn the real Daniel, the one who had been lost long before the boat ever sank. Life continued, quiet and peaceful. The story of Daniel Davenport, the man who came back from the dead to rob his own widow, became a local legend, a cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties. I was the quiet, enigmatic figure at the center of it, a woman who had faced down a ghost and won. One day, I received a letter. It was from a federal prison. My first instinct was to throw it away, but I opened it. It was from Daniel. "Isabella," it began, "I know you have no reason to read this. I deserve nothing from you, not even a moment of your time. But I write this not for you, but for me. I need to say it. You were right. I was a ghost long before I faked my own death. The man you married, the man who loved you and our son, he died the day he made a deal with Julian Thorne. He was poisoned by greed and by the ghosts of my own family's failures. What was left was just a shell, an actor playing a part. I don't ask for forgiveness. There is no forgiveness for what I did. I destroyed our family. I destroyed our son's memory of his father. I tried to destroy you. But you were stronger than all of my lies. You were stronger than me, than Thorne, than the entire weight of my family's rotten legacy. You were the one thing I could never fake, and the one thing I truly lost. I hope in your new life you find the happiness you always deserved, the happiness I stole from you. Goodbye, Isabella. I folded the letter. I did not feel anger. I did not feel pity. I felt nothing. He was a character from a book I had finished reading a long time ago. My life, now, is my own. It is quiet, but it is not empty. It is filled with books, with art, with the laughter of my son and his growing family, with the satisfying work of my foundation. I have found a peace I never thought possible. Sometimes, when I look at the old photographs of my young, happy family, I feel a pang of sadness for the life that was lost, for the man who chose a fortune over a soul. But then, I look at the life I have built from the ashes of his betrayal, and the sadness fades. My name is Isabella. I was a wife, then a widow, then a victim, but a ghost from the past forced me to become something else entirely. A survivor, a warrior, the master of my own story. My husband thought his reappearance would be the final chapter of my life. He had no idea it was just the explosive, satisfying, and liberating beginning of mine. The day I found my husband at the altar was not the end of my world. It was the day I got it back. If you liked my story of deception, survival, and ultimate justice, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Let me know in the comments where in the world you are listening from. And what do you think is the greatest betrayal? I'm always curious to read your opinions. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Until the next story, take care, with love and respect.